Hey everyone, this is Whispering Reapers, and tonight we're diving into 5 very disturbing incidents that happened when people were just at home. We like to think of home as safe, private, the one place we can truly relax. But sometimes inexplicable terrors take hold in the very walls and halls meant to protect us. Imagine you come home late from work one evening, stepping into your familiar living room with that sigh of relief. The day is done. You just want to relax. That was the mindset of Chandler, a quiet office worker in a suburban neighborhood. He lived alone in a small 2-bedroom house he inherited from his grandparents. The place was well worn with creaky floors, a modest interior, and an attic accessible by a pull-down ladder in the hallway. He never used the attic except for storing a couple of old suitcases. It was dusty up there, with maybe the occasional mouse or spider. He rarely even thought about it. Weeks passed in his usual routine: work, home, dinner, bed, until he started hearing something overhead at night. The first time it was a light scuttling like a rodent might make. He ignored it, but the noise grew persistent over the following days. Soon it sounded heavier, more like muffled footsteps. Sometimes it woke him up around 2 or 3 in the morning. He lay in the dark, straining to figure out if it was just the old house settling or truly footsteps. One evening, curiosity took over. Chandler turned on every light, fetched a flashlight and a small toolkit, then tugged down the attic ladder. A stale smell greeted him. He coughed. The wooden steps felt sticky with dust. Carefully, he poked his head up. The flashlight beam revealed cobwebbed rafters, a few cardboard boxes, nothing unusual. No sign of footprints in the thick dust. He turned the light around, half expecting to see a raccoon or something. But the attic was empty. Satisfied, he climbed back down, feeling a tad foolish. That night, he fell asleep easily. But around 1 a.m. he snapped awake to the sound of a creaking floorboard above him. This time it was no subtle scratch. It was a distinct step, then another. His heart pounded. He listened in silence. The steps moved from one corner of the attic to the other. He broke into a sweat. Had some intruder quietly climbed in after he'd checked? He mustered the nerve to call out, "Who's up there?" Chandler. "Vio. Who's up there?" Instant hush. No answer. The following minute dragged on like a slow drip of dread. Then he heard one more step, gentler now, as though someone was trying not to be heard. Fear overcame him. He called the police, explaining that he suspected an intruder in his attic. Officers arrived, searching thoroughly, but found nobody. The dust was undisturbed, no footprints. They told Chandler it might be a raccoon or cat. He tried to accept that, but the footsteps had sounded too distinct, too human. Night after night, the sound returned, sometimes right above his bedroom. He'd hear slow, deliberate steps crossing back and forth. One time, he swore he heard a faint dragging noise, as if something heavy was being pulled across the attic floor. He took another look up there in daylight, shining his flashlight into every corner. Again, total emptiness. Then he noticed a strange smell, not just dust or dryness, but a subtle odor like rotting wood or damp cloth. He couldn't locate its source. He placed a motion-sensitive camera, hoping to catch evidence. The next morning, he found the camera on the floor, lens cracked. The memory card was missing. That was too far beyond a lone house-settling explanation. Something was toying with him, or so he believed. Or... Alarmed, he told close friends and neighbors, but they shrugged it off, joking maybe the house was haunted. One friend came to stay over. They both camped out in the living room, determined to see if the footsteps would occur. Sure enough, around 2:30 in the morning, faint but definite steps overhead. The friend's eyes widened. "Friend, that's no raccoon," he whispered. They rushed into the hallway, yanked down the attic ladder and called up, "Hey, we hear you." Chandler and friend, "Hey, we hear you." Silence except for a single scuffle, then quiet. The friend climbed up part way, shining a bright lantern. Found nothing. The dust looked undisturbed. Both men retreated, unnerved. Chandler considered leaving, but the house was his. Where would he go? Instead, he had heavier locks installed, changed his routine, and tried to ignore the nightly creep. Then one weekend afternoon, he was in the backyard clearing weeds when he glimpsed movement in an attic vent near the roof. Something retreated from the slats. Could that be a reflection of an eye? He froze, blood pounding. If someone was truly up there, how were they surviving? He rarely kept food in the attic, but maybe they snuck down when he wasn't home. That same evening, determined to put an end to it, he summoned his courage. At dusk, he locked all the doors, set up all lights, and pulled down the attic ladder quietly. With a baseball bat in one hand and a flashlight in the other, he climbed. The attic hush felt thick, the beam cutting through dusty air. He advanced slowly. The wooden boards creaked under his weight. In the far corner behind a heap of old quilts, something seemed off. The dust pattern was shifted, as if brushed away. He approached. The quilts concealed a small gap in the insulation. He carefully moved the quilts aside, shining light into the gap. Inside that cramped space was a nest-like arrangement, old blankets, crumpled clothes, bits of trash. Realizing that items were stolen from his house, a missing t-shirt, random utensils, half-eaten food wrappers, Chandler's mind reeled. This wasn't a ghost. Someone had been living up here. In a burst of adrenaline, he shouted, demanding, "Chandler, whoever you are, come out now!" But no one emerged. Then behind him, from the darkness near the attic entrance, came a darting figure. He spun around, glimpsing a pale face, wide eyes. The figure raced for the ladder, slipping down with uncanny speed. Chandler scrambled after, nearly toppling over. By the time he reached the hallway, the front door was flung open. Outside, footsteps receded into the night. He called the cops, who arrived to search the yard and neighborhood, but found no trace. The attic nest indicated someone had been squatting there, creeping down for food, using the vent for air. That explained the footsteps, the weird smells. Yet the intruder was never caught. Months passed. The sightings quieted. But sometimes late at night, Chandler still wakes up, convinced he hears faint scuttling above, as if that mysterious occupant returned. Even if he calls authorities, they find nothing. The notion that a stranger lurked above him for who knows how long remains terrifying, a private, personal violation. He ended up moving out eventually, renting the place to someone else. He never told them about the attic intruder. He just wanted to forget. But if you talk to him today, he'll say there's no worse horror than suspecting someone's living in your house above your head, watching you sleep. That single truth still gives him nightmares. Elena was a recent college graduate renting a tiny one-bedroom apartment. It was an older building with squeaky floors and chipped paint, but the rent was cheap in an expensive city. She painted the walls bright colors, added cozy furniture, and tried to make the space her own. In the narrow hallway leading to the bedroom, she hung a stylish mirror. She liked mirrors, said they made the space feel bigger. She had no idea that one day that same mirror would reflect something truly disturbing. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. Day job, groceries, hanging out with friends on weekends. Then she started noticing strange movements in the corner of her eye while crossing the hallway. She'd see the mirror from an angle as she headed to the kitchen or bathroom. At times, it seemed the reflection didn't match her real-time action, like a half-second lag or a shadow crossing behind her that wasn't there in reality. She chalked it up to illusions or maybe quirks of the old light fixtures. But it kept happening. One evening, she was carrying laundry when a flicker in the mirror caught her attention. She paused, stepping back to see if there was something behind her. Nothing. The reflection was just normal. She told herself she was spooking out over nothing. Days later, she was brushing her hair in the hallway mirror. The overhead light flickered. For a heartbeat, she saw a figure standing behind her, a dark shape with elongated limbs. She spun around. The hallway was empty. Her heart pounded. Checking the mirror again, she saw only her wide-eyed face. She told a friend who teased her that she might be seeing ghosts. But deep down, Eleanor felt uneasy, like the mirror had become some gateway for odd illusions. She tried ignoring it. Then one night, as she microwaved a late snack, she heard a faint humming from the hallway. She stepped out, investigating. The mirror's surface seemed to shimmer. She approached cautiously. Noticing that where she expected to see her reflection, it appeared slightly out of sync. The reflection's gestures didn't match hers. She gasped. The reflection's eyes were locked on her, but the real Elena was angled differently. Then it snapped into correct alignment, as if glitching. Elena's skin crawled. She retreated to her bedroom, shutting the door. That night she hardly slept, hearing soft taps from the hallway. She feared opening the bedroom door. Next morning she resolved to remove the mirror. She unhooked it from the wall, wrapped it in cloth, and placed it in storage. The hallway felt barer but safer. Life returned to normal, until a few nights later she heard faint whispering from the closet where she'd put the mirror. She nervously opened the closet door, shining a flashlight. She saw the cloth covering parted slightly, like it had been tugged. The mirror's edge peeked out. She froze, feeling an unshakable sense that something behind the glass wanted out. She slammed the closet shut. Thinking she might be losing it, Eleanor shared the story with a co-worker who had an interest in the paranormal. The co-worker suggested maybe the mirror was cursed or had some negative attachment. That spooked Eleanor enough to plan to throw it away, so she carried it to the dumpster that weekend. As she walked, the cloth slipped, revealing the mirror's surface. She glimpsed a dark silhouette in the reflection that didn't match her surroundings. She almost dropped it, nearly screaming. She forced herself to keep going, heaving it into the dumpster. Relieved, she walked away. That same night, loud knocks rattled her front door. She checked the peephole. No one. The knocking repeated, echoing like someone hammered from inside the hallway. She yelled, asking who was there. Silence. She eventually opened the door, found the corridor empty, but on the floor lay a single shard of mirrored glass, as if it had broken off. She recognized the pattern on the backing. It was from her mirror. Did someone rummage the dumpster and place it there? Or had the mirror somehow come back? Furious, she flushed the shard down the trash chute, hoping that ended it. Weirdness subsided, though Elena never shook the feeling of being watched. The hallway never quite felt welcoming again. She left the apartment a few months later due to a job relocation. The next tenant apparently found a piece of mirror lodged in the closet door track. That tenant complained about seeing fleeting shapes out of the corner of their eye. Management eventually replaced the entire closet door. Elena, for her part, still has nightmares about that reflection that wasn't her. She insists that a twisted presence resided in the mirror, mimicking her movements but always slightly off, as though waiting to break free. Even now, she refuses to place large mirrors in her home. She says once you've seen a reflection move on its own, you realize that the boundary between normalcy and something far darker can be perilously thin. Rahim and Mina were newlyweds who moved into an older suburban home at a great price. It had a cozy yard, decent living space, and an unfinished basement that they planned to eventually turn into a rec room. The real estate agent told them the basement needed some ceiling and new flooring, but overall it was structurally sound. They noticed a small locked door under the stairs, apparently a crawl space or some extra storage. The agent said the previous owners never used it and lost the key. That was fine with them at first. They had plenty of other storage. As they settled in, they seldom ventured into the basement except for laundry. The locked door stayed an afterthought, but then inexplicable things started happening around the house. Odd thumping sounds at night, as if something knocked from beneath the floor. They'd hear scuttling behind the walls, or so they thought. They assumed it was rodents. They set traps, found none. The noises persisted, mostly around 2 or 3 in the morning. Thump, 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 faint yet deliberate. One day, while tidying the basement, Mina discovered a rancid smell near the locked door. She tried ignoring it, opening windows to air the place out. The smell faded, then returned the next day, stronger. They called a pest control service. The technician said he found no evidence of animals. He recommended checking that locked crawl space, but there was no key, so the conversation ended inconclusively. The smell lingered on. Rahim decided enough was enough. He borrowed a bolt cutter from a friend. They hammered at the old padlock on the door. It took effort, but eventually it snapped. The door stuck as they pulled. Something behind it resisted. Finally, it creaked open, releasing a gush of foul, stale air. Their flashlights revealed a cramped, low-ceilinged space with a dirt floor and ancient wooden shelves. The smell assaulted them, a mix of rot and stagnation. They stepped inside cautiously, scanning. At first they saw only dirt and random junk, a cracked plastic bin, old newspapers, some rotted planks. Then Rahim's flashlight revealed a cluster of large jars in one corner. Each jar was sealed but discolored with murky fluid inside. With trembling curiosity, Mina approached. Through the glass, something floated, like lumps of cloth or perhaps organic matter. She nearly gagged. They forced themselves to open one jar carefully, though the stench nearly knocked them over. Inside was unidentifiable sludge after so long, but it might have been some small animal remains or old rotted food. Disgusted, they decided to trash the entire set. But as Rahim lifted the third jar, he noticed scraps of cloth that looked strangely like child's clothing with small embroidered patterns. Horror dawned. Why would a child's garment be sealed in vile liquid? Disturbed, they rummaged further. The shelves contained battered notebooks scribbled with incomprehensible notes, lists of dates, weird symbols. One page read, "To keep them quiet, to keep them from leaving the house, must feed them." The handwriting was frantic. Another page mentioned a name, Wendell, apparently referencing a previous occupant. The final lines repeated, "Don't let them out, don't let them out." Mina's blood ran cold. Then she heard a scraping behind them. Both turned, hearts hammering. The door they left ajar was now half closed. A flicker of movement vanished beyond it. They froze, bracing themselves for some intruder. Rahim lunged to open the door fully, but found only the basement gloom. Spooked, they left the crawl space, planning to call the authorities. They propped the door open, wanting no part in letting it close behind them. Once upstairs, they dialed the police. An officer arrived, hearing the story but unimpressed. He suspected it was old weird stuff left behind, probably no crime. The jars might be animals or decayed produce. He wrote a casual note and left, telling them to discard everything properly. They felt a swirl of confusion and dread. That night, they sealed the door with new locks from the outside. They told themselves they'd remove the jars in daylight. But as darkness fell, the house felt suffocating. Sure enough, around 2 a.m., pounding erupted from the basement. Not subtle or faint this time, but heavy, angry thuds shaking the floor. They jolted awake, exchanging terrified glances. The sound grew more frantic, as if someone or something slammed that locked door from the inside. They cowered in their bedroom, calling 911. By the time officers showed up, the basement was silent. The door stood locked, unmarked. No fresh sign of forced entry. The police left again. Sleep was impossible. At sunrise, Rahim worked up nerve, hammered the door open to check inside the crawl space again. The jars were overturned, fluid spilled, the shelves knocked down. That primal stench choked the air. On the dirt floor, they saw prints, small, child-sized footprints leading to the far corner, where the dirt parted to reveal a gaping hole. The footprints disappeared inside the hole. Fear hammered their minds. Something had been in those jars or connected to them. The hole looked freshly dug. They backed away, deciding to bulldoze the entire crawl space. But after a few phone calls, they realized it'd be expensive. They ended up moving out soon after, renting the place to a new family. The basement door was replaced, sealed again. Rumor circulates that the next family also complained about weird noises. Some mention that at times a child's laughter echoes from the basement, though no child lives there. Others say the memory of those jars might hint at some dark ritual that bound spirits or forces to the house. No one can confirm. Rahim and Mina just wanted to forget. But the memory of the footprints in the cramped earthen hole still haunts them. They learned that disturbing find at home can reveal horrors beyond logic, can upend the sense of safety. Because sometimes your house might hold secrets nobody wants to confront. In a modern high-rise apartment complex, everything seemed pristine, bright lobbies, polished elevators, contemporary design. The perfect place for a young professional named Charlene. She had a 12th floor unit with sleek floors, big windows and an open floor plan. An ideal space for her fresh start. For a month life was smooth, though the building had slightly odd ventilation systems. Charlene noticed her vents hissed or whistled occasionally. Maintenance said it was normal. She believed them. Until she started hearing what seemed like faint whispers in the hiss. Late at night, while reading or watching TV, she'd hear a murmur drifting through the living room vent. She pressed mute, focusing. The hushed sound was so subtle, like a distant voice. At first she shrugged it off as neighboring apartments or random pipe noise. But over time it grew more distinct. Words occasionally formed. She once heard what sounded like her own name, Charlene, softly. That made her hair stand on end. She told no one, not wanting to sound paranoid. But curiosity ate at her. Next time that whisper began, she leaned close to the vent. The voice, if it was a voice, repeated something less clear. She caught phrases that might be, "Come in," or "I see." She recorded it on her phone, though the sound came out faint and crackly. She approached the landlord, who insisted it must be air currents or the building's central system echoing. But Charlene couldn't shake it. On a whim, she typed a note on her phone. "Hello, who is this?" Reading it out loud near the vent, feeling silly. Then silence. She gave up, feeling ridiculous. That night, she heard the voice again whispering hello. Shocked, she realized if this was real, maybe it responded to her greeting. Goosebumps. She tried to rationalize. Could it be a neighbor messing around using some hidden mic or vent trick? She systematically asked around. Neighbors said they heard no such thing. One older resident joked that the building once had a problem with unauthorized intercom wires crossing. But that didn't explain hearing her name. Charlene started losing sleep. She dreaded the nighttime hush. Sure enough, around midnight or so, the vent's hush emerged, beckoning her with an eerie moan or half-formed words like "can't leave" or "help me." Disturbed, she put earplugs in. Some nights she left music on to drown it out. It escalated one night when she heard heavier breathing and a distinct line, "I'm here." Terrified, she jumped up, banging on the vent with a shoe, yelling, "Go away, what do you want?" No clear answer came, though the whispering hiss changed pitch. She moved to the bedroom, turned on all lights, tried to calm down. Around 1 a.m., the living room lights flickered, an unexpected surge. She tiptoed out to check the breaker. The vent hiss had grown into something resembling a deep voice. This time she made out Charlene. "Come, vent." She nearly panicked, calling her mum to talk to her until morning. Her mother urged her to leave that apartment. But Charlene wasn't financially ready to break the lease. Desperate, she spoke to building security. They accompanied her to the rooftop where main vents were. Everything looked normal, no sign of tampering. She consulted a friend who believed in the paranormal. The friend suggested burning sage, chanting protection prayers. Charlene tried it. She also taped cardboard over the vent, hoping to block the noise. For a couple nights it seemed quiet. Then, as if in defiance, the entire cardboard arrangement was found shredded on the floor one morning. She had no explanation. The final straw happened on a stormy evening. Wind whipped outside and the building creaked. She was on the couch, dozing, when the vent started rattling. Suddenly, a loud clang from within the duct, followed by a harsh voice. "Let me in!" The metal panel above the vent popped. She screamed, rushing for the door. She swore she glimpsed a hand or some shape pushing from inside the vent's darkness. Real or hallucination? She wasn't sticking around to find out. She fled the apartment, spent the night at a friend's place. The next day, she informed the landlord she was leaving. He threatened lease issues, but after seeing her terror and some suspicious vent damage, he relented. She moved out within a week. Many suspect the building's design or acoustics caused strange phenomena, maybe air pressure or some very odd conduction of neighbors' voices. But Charlene remains convinced an entity or presence lurked in that vent. She wonders if it had latched onto the building's structure, preying on the occupant's vulnerabilities. The occupant after her apparently never reported anything, or so the manager says. But Charlene can't forget the deep voice calling her name. Even today in her new home, she hates ventilation systems. She covers them or places furniture in front. She sleeps with a white noise machine, ensuring no stray hiss can morph into a sinister whisper. Because once you've heard your name through the vent late at night, it's impossible to feel confident your own walls are safe. Title: Story 5, Night Terrors in the Backyard. Edgar was a retired teacher living in a modest house with a decent backyard. He prided himself on landscaping, flowers, shrubs, a small vegetable patch. That yard was his sanctuary. He'd read outside under the shade, sipped tea in the morning. Everything felt peaceful for years, until an odd phenomenon started creeping in. One evening as he watered the plants at dusk, he glimpsed a shape near the back fence. It looked like a hunched figure observing him. He called out. It melted into the shadows as though it was never there, possibly an animal or neighbor, he told himself. But over the following weeks, that shape kept reappearing, always at twilight, whenever Edgar was outside. He saw it from the corner of his vision, near the hedges or behind a tree. By the time he turned, it was gone. He grew paranoid, installing solar lights around the yard. Yet some nights, those lights flickered or turned off unexpectedly. Then he'd see that silhouette again, a bit closer each time. He told a friend who teased him about Bigfoot in the backyard. But Edgar felt certain this was no animal. It stood upright, too tall and spindly, reminiscent of a person, but the proportions seemed off. Eventually he decided to keep inside after dark. That was fine initially. Then he started hearing scraping at his back door around 11 p.m. Slow, methodical scratches, as though nails or claws were dragged across the wood. He'd yank open the curtains, see nobody. The yard empty except the faint rustling of leaves. This happened so frequently that he started leaving lights on all night. The scraping would pause while he peered out, then resume a bit later. He suspected a prowler, so he installed a small security camera aimed at the back door, but each morning the footage was static or blank during the exact times the scraping occurred. The rest of the day the camera worked fine. That made no sense, like something jammed the feed. One evening, determined, Edgar sat in the dark near a window, camera phone in hand. Right on cue, gentle scraping around 11:15. He parted the curtains just enough to see. In the faint backyard light, he glimpsed an emaciated shape crouched by the door, arms extended, lightly dragging what looked like bony fingers across the surface. He stifled a gasp, heart hammering. He tried to record it, but in that second the shape scuttled away unbelievably fast. He only captured a blur. The next day he found shallow scratch marks on the door. The wood had been scored as if by a blade, forming odd symbols or random lines he couldn't tell. He consulted a neighbor who said peculiar sightings had been reported in the area. Some folks claimed it was a feral person or a cryptid lurking in the neighborhood's greenbelt. Others insisted it was a drifter, but the oddness continued. One night, an even more disturbing incident occurred. Edgar dozed off in the living room, only to jolt awake past midnight. The back door rattled violently, like someone tried to open it. He flicked on the lights and shouted. The rattling stopped, but then a whispery voice from outside, muffled yet distinct enough to send a chill. "Let me in." The doorknob jostled again. Edgar froze. He barked at whoever it was to leave, threatened to call the cops, then silence. He dialed the police. By the time they arrived, the yard was empty. The fence gate was open, but no footprints. Officers gave him standard advice: lock your doors, maybe get a dog. Edgar, thoroughly shaken, boarded up the backyard windows. He dreaded nightfall. Days went by without incident, lulling him into a fragile calm. Then around 2 a.m. one windy night, the security light in the yard triggered. Through his bedroom window, he saw the shape once more near the fence. He watched in horror as it scaled the fence with shocking agility and vanished into the darkness on the other side. The next morning he found fresh scratch marks on the door, deeper than before, and the handle was bent. The intangible sense of being hunted took root in him. He barely slept, living in fear the intruder might break a window next time. Finally, he installed stronger door reinforcements, new cameras, even motion sensors. For a week, everything was quiet. Then one sensor triggered at 3 a.m. He mustered courage to check the monitors. The yard camera showed a tall, gaunt figure stepping across the grass. The face was partially turned away, but the outline looked contorted. It glided instead of walking, pausing at the back door. Then it stared at the camera, eyes glowing faintly in the IR light, an unnatural reflection. Edgar watched, transfixed. The figure slowly raised a long-fingered hand as though pressing it to the lens. The feed cut to static. He nearly fainted from fright. He never saw that figure again on camera, but the memory was enough to make him put the house on the market. By the time the property sold, Edgar had triple locks on every entrance. Some nights he still heard light scratching or soft tapping on the windows. He told the buyer about typical home features, but never mentioned the nightly visits. He left seeking a calmer place. Rumors say the next owners also ended up terrified by a slender shape lurking at the fence line. No one has definitive proof of what it is, some shapeless creature or disturbed drifter. Wherever the truth lies, Edgar will warn you that sometimes your backyard can hide a nightmare waiting to knock on your door. And when home stops feeling safe, every night becomes a test of bravery. Thanks for sticking with me through these 5 very disturbing accounts of what happened to people while they were simply at home. Each story reminds us that even our personal sanctuary can become a stage for nightmares. Footsteps that aren't ours, silhouettes that shouldn't exist, voices that whisper our name in the dark. Let me know in the comments which part of these stories unsettled you the most. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Whispering Reapers. Stay safe, everyone. Because sometimes the scariest things happen where we feel safest, behind our own locked doors.